talking about the myths and realities of the Olympics industry. A professor at UBC, he's also one of the founders of 2010 Watch, a 2010 Olympic watchdog organization. He's recently published the book, Five-Ring Circus, Myths and Realities of the Olympic Games.
What I want to do in the next 10 minutes is try and deconstruct the Olympic frame, and the one that's been conditioned into all of our brains through saturation advertising most of our lives. The official Olympic frame is that the Olympics are about peace and brotherhood and good things like that, and that the world comes together for this period of time, and wars cease, and human rights are promoted, and it's done through the auspices of elite sports. And the Olympics have added the third pillar of Olympism, which is respect for the environment. So the Olympics are always going to be green. And not only that societies and communities that host the Olympics become rich, because the Olympics bring in vast tourist dollars, and money flows, and money rains from the sky. It's kind of a Milton Friedman-esque notion that you give enough oats to the horse, some of it's going to come out for the sparrow, so everyone's going to get rich. And I'll oppose that notion by suggesting to you that what you really have here is something much more like the Nigerian banking scam. And I assume all of you are familiar with the Nigerian banking scam. If you're not, I'll give you a brief notice about what it is. I get a dozen of these a week. Nigerian banking scam originated in West Africa, but they come from everywhere now. And the basic idea is someone you don't know contacts you and says, I've heard about you from a mutual friend, and they tell me you're really a reliable person, you're a good person, and I've got this problem because my brother, my uncle, my cousin, my wife, my husband died suddenly, and they were a minister of whatever government, and they left $200 million in the bank, and I can't get it out. And the problem is the government of my country is going to take that money because they now know about it, and they're going to go use it, and they're going to kill orphans or start a war, or they're going to do something horrible with that, and I need your help. So I need your help, because if I can get it into your bank account, then I'll come over there and we'll share it. You get half and I get half. Sounds good. And so what they've done simultaneously, and some of these are really quite cleverly crafted, they appeal to altruism and greed at the same time. You don't want orphans to be killed, of course, and you're going to get rich by preventing orphans being killed. So looking at those two frames, let's now look at some recent examples and see where the reality lies. Is it more like the Nigerian banking scam, or is it really about peace and brotherhood and riches for all of us? And we don't have to look far into the past. We can look at any number of games, but let's look at Beijing, and then we'll focus here on Vancouver. So the Beijing Games opened. Remember, they're about peace, according to the official IOC mantra. The Beijing Games opened, and what happened? The Georgians launched an invasion of South Ossetia, right on almost the opening day. And the Russians counter-invaded. So right away you had a war going on at the same time that the games were opening. So much for peace. And 2002, Salt Lake City, Americans had their games, and a year later they invaded Iraq. And so the whole notion that somehow the wars will cease, or that we'll bring the world together in peace and brotherhood, doesn't really occur, because nations ignore this, as they have throughout history. So it's not really about peace. Is it about brotherhood and human rights? Again, let's go back to Beijing. For the games, something like, according to the Committee on Housing and Evictions, based in Switzerland, something like 1.5 million Chinese who lived in Beijing were evicted from their homes to make way for Olympic venues. Those people often received little or no compensation, and they brought in tens of thousands of migrant workers who were unceremoniously thrown out of Beijing just before the games, so that the tourists wouldn't look at the shanty towns that they were forced to live in while they were constructing the venues. How green were the games? Well, the games in Beijing took so much construction was going on that they took water from all the surrounding farmlands around Beijing, to the extent that the farming around the city basically came to a halt. So they weren't green either. The Olympics likes to pride itself on being able to promote human rights, and so they set aside protest zones in Beijing. But if you actually were foolish enough to actually apply to protest, you found yourself in a re-education through labor camp really quickly. And some elderly residents of Beijing who had actually been displaced and wanted to make their voices heard to the Western media are now sitting in a camp someplace learning about the folly of their ways. And then you saw the illusion that was created with the little girl who was not really the little girl who was singing the song. You saw the gymnasts who were underage, the fireworks that were digitally enhanced, enhanced. So what you saw in Beijing was real impacts on people that were extremely negative. Wars did not cease, and again, I can't even begin to estimate how much it cost, although CBC said it cost about $60 billion. And so all of the things, the illusion versus the reality in Beijing were starkly obvious. And the Western media picked up on a lot of this, and they spent a lot of time beating up on the Chinese government for this. But I would suggest that when 2010 comes, that the journalists who are doing the jobs will find that we are not much better. So what have we seen here? How much peace and brotherhood do we have here in Vancouver? Well, all we have to do is walk out the door here and walk a couple feet away, and we can see how many homeless people are living on our streets. This is probably the greatest scandal this city has ever faced, to have 3,000 homeless people out there with essentially no services. Accountability, there has been essentially none. The organizing committee of the Games, going back to the original bid society, which was dissolved by the province for not filing financial reports, the bid corps, which filed no audited financial reports, the current VANOC, which files no audited reports, and basically the province does no monitoring. So when we were promised that there would be accountability for every penny spent, I don't think anybody in the room, and then certainly nobody in City Hall, has any idea how much money has been spent. It's certainly hundreds of millions of dollars, and there's been no accountability whatsoever for that. Human rights. We're going to see how much they respect human rights when the Games come, and the security apparatus descends on the city. The estimate of something like 15,000 soldiers and police and various security services. The nature of the civil rights violations that I think are coming are going to be astonishing. How much democracy went into the Games? Very little. We had a plebiscite that was non-binding, so even had the no side won, it wouldn't have counted. And against the no side was the yes side, with 3 levels of government supporting it, putting millions of dollars into saturation advertising. Transparency, again, none. How green are the Games? Well, again, remember that the greenness is supposed to be the third pillar of Olympism. If you've driven past Eagle Ridge lately, you realize that there is this gaping hole in the mountain, and a lot of people went to jail for this, and one elder, Harriet Nahaney, died for this, and Betty Croswitz spent 10 months in jail for this. And what they did is they cut down a 500-year-old arbutus forest, one of the last arbutus forests in the Lower Mainland. They destroyed wetlands for red-listed species. And up and down the Sea to Sky Highway, as you drive the Sea to Sky Highway now, you see massive destruction, and they're doing the same thing in the Callahan. They've basically terraformed large pieces of the Callahan and put a series of trails across it, and what they're planning to do in the Callahan, which they planned from the beginning, is to create a 4-season resort in what had been a relatively pristine area. So it's not green. In addition, the construction and the transportation is putting out about 3.5 megatons of carbon dioxide, which is 5% of British Columbia's annual output, more than 77 countries on the planet. So there's nothing green about these Games whatsoever. So I would suggest from that when you look at all those areas of accountability, of democracy, of how green the Games are, of the security implications, and of the cost, and I forgot to mention cost. Remember, it was going to make us all rich. Well, the Games will probably cost us, by the time we're done, well over $6 billion. And so imagine what $6 billion would have done for the other social priorities that I think are much more urgent, whether it's coming up with rational solutions for homelessness, whether it's medical research, whether it's any number of things that our society much more urgently needs than a new convention center and an upgraded Sea to Sky Highway that destroyed environment, or the other mega projects. And so what the frame really is about, we don't really have to guess. It is the Nigerian banking scam, and instead of being inflicted on one person at a time, it's inflicted on a society all at once. So the message at the local level is the Games are all about real estate, and they always are all about real estate, because in every Olympic Games there is a real estate project they want, whether it's Chicago bidding on the 2016 Games, trying to develop the lakefront, New York bid on the 2012 Games, trying to develop Hell's Kitchen, London trying to develop and now developing East Stratford. It's always about real estate at the local level. And the IOC has a different agenda. They don't care about any of these things. They don't care about the greenness of the Games. They don't care about Indigenous peoples. They don't care about what it costs society. They want their television marketing rights, and that's what they get. So the IOC comes in, they take their $1 billion per year, They pay no taxes anywhere on this planet, including in Switzerland, and they get away, they scoot out the door with their $1 billion in profit. And that's what you have. So you have a real estate and marketing scam that has real-world consequences for those of us who live here. It impacts Native peoples, it impacts the poor, it impacts all of society that ends up paying for it. So, in my view, it really is the Nigerian banking scam, and we're all its victims. Thank you.